Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be flashing back to the past, traveling back in time to 1922, and we're going to be reviewing the 1922 version of Nosferatu. And we are joined by a very special guest. You have probably seen his name pop up in some of our previous episodes. He is an amazing editor and edited some of our episodes, part of the Movies and Us team. And we're so excited to finally have Melvin on the pod. Okay, Melvin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a ton of fun. I watched Nosferatu a couple years ago, I think during its 100th anniversary. So when you guys were saying you were going to be checking it out in prep for the Eggers edition, I was like, that sounds like a good time. Please let me be on that episode. Yeah, I help edit some of the shows. I actually got to know Jen and Sarah by having them on my podcast, probably August. I was when we recorded, but we released in September. Did a Francis Ha episode, which was just so good. And then I reached out to them afterward and was just like, you guys are just good at what you do. Can I help? Can I edit some shows every couple weeks or something? So we work something out. I help edit a couple episodes here and there. And yeah, my show is Cinematic Doctrine. It's been going on since 2015. Actually, just I think a year younger than yours, which is kind of cool now that we're working together. And we do weekly episodes. There's 3 types of shows: movie discussions, party pleasers, and let's talks. Movie discussions are just very similar to what you guys do here. Party pleasers are beginning to end descriptions of an entire movie with commentary and humor. It's very similar to Mystery Science Theater. And then let's talks, which are more broad topical things with movies to jump off of. But so a bit more. So you never know what you're going to get week to week, mostly movie discussions, but it's been a lot of fun. And at this point now, I guess this will be our 3rd recording together, because you guys were also with us for Joker 2. So everyone should go check that out, because I think that episode also turned out really good. But yeah, I'm excited to be on your show this time.
We've been scheming for this for a while, so this is very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting that Melvin's finally on the pod with us. And yeah, been such a blessing to Movies and Us team. And we're just absolutely thrilled. One of the highlights of the year, for sure, getting connected with Melvin. Mm-hmm. But we are here to talk about some 1922 vampire horror. So, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Nosferatu?
Sure. Vampire Count Orlok expresses interest in a new resident and real estate agent Hutter's wife.
All right. So in Movies and Us tradition, we like to start off with our one-sentence summaries for the film. And Melvin, as our guest, do you want to share what your one-sentence summary is for Nosferatu?
Yeah, so I had maybe piracy is good, actually. So I don't know if you're familiar with some of the history on this, but it basically only exists nowadays because of piracy. So thank you, pirates. Thank you so much. This is so good.
Oh, I love it. Sarah, what is your one-sentence summary?
Mine is, reading can save lives.
Yeah. Nice. My one-sentence summary is, cinema, our precious cinema.
As far back as 1922.
All right. Well, let's dive right in. We are going to share our high-level thoughts about Nosferatu in this 1922 version, and then we will include a spoiler. It's been 102 years.
You've had 100 years to watch this movie. Come on, guys.
You've had your entire lifetime to watch this movie since birth. So at that point, we're not sparing you any longer. We're just going to go ahead and spoil the movie at a certain point. So we'll do a short kind of spoiler-free section at the beginning here. So, Melvin, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about Nosferatu. Maybe as you mentioned, you watched it 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. What inspired that? It sounds like it was the 100-year anniversary. Had you seen it before? And then I'm always so intrigued about what things deepen and become crystallized in rewatches. So I'm intrigued to hear your latest experience.
Totally, yeah. So I think I had watched it because it was the 100th year anniversary. I thought that would be pretty exciting. And like, it was also out of like, I guess not spite is the right word, but basically I missed a theater screening that would have been the film being silent and then a pianist would have accompanied the film. And I just, gosh, I like keep thinking about how I missed that. And it's just such a disappointment. So I was just like, fine. Just got to watch it, get it done. So I watched the Kino release, Kino Lorber, and it was just, it was just a really impressive movie. It's an interesting example of the transition from like painting / photography, so still imagery, to the moving picture, because a lot of what is so stark and frightening in the film is stuff where, you know, like someone probably made like some kind of, I don't even know if storyboards existed then, but like somebody painted petrifying imagery and then they filmed it, and there are just like pretty consistent moments that keeps happening up into the very end, which has just a very shocking visual. And because it's all black and white, something about that sears and burns into your mind that just lingers, and I've always remembered that. The thing I did not remember during the second rewatch that became more present was there's such a focus on nature throughout the film. So the first time I watched was the Kino Lorber release, which imitates an old style of coloring film where you would really just cover the whole screen with a single color to kind of like draw out some image to the visuals. The version I watched this time, which seemed to be the only one available, was just a general coloring. And so like there was rudimentary coloring for people's faces, dresses, clothing. And the beginning has so much green from all the foliage, even sometimes like bordering the frame of the film. And so there's like this transition out of like nature in like the city to nature unfettered to then like coming back to the city, and it's just industrial like brick and mortar. And yeah, so I found that fascinating. And then of course, I mean, there's this like a section in the movie that's just like scientists looking at things that are small. So there's just a lot of stuff at play. And then if I can just add one more contrast here, at least in terms of watching and rewatching, I've seen Todd Browning's Dracula, and this is just a better version of adapting Dracula. That movie is so boring. I really like Todd Browning. The Unknown is amazing. Freaks makes me weep. I love Freaks. But Dracula is just down there, like with The Mummy and Creature of the Black Lagoon, for worst Universal Monsters movie. And so I always kind of find it entertaining that Nosferatu, the borderline illegal plagiarism of Bram Stoker's Dracula, is just better in every respect. And then poor Bela Lugosi, yeah, I guess he's good at Dracula, but that movie's so boring. So yeah, I've always enjoyed this one. Like since first watching it, I was always impressed by it. And yeah, I think it's still not just worthwhile historically, but just worthwhile as a movie. But this was your guys' first time, right, Jen and Sarah? Yeah, okay, they're nodding. Yeah. So I am totally curious of what you guys thought.
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to share your thoughts about Nosferatu?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously it's just amazing that this movie is 100 years old. Like that's just so wild to me. And just thinking about like 100 years is not that long in the grand scheme of things. And our world has changed so much in those 100 years, and technology has advanced so rapidly. So I think even just watching this, I was amazed at just like human ingenuity and being able to create this thing 100 years ago, and that we can still watch it today is pretty incredible. And then I was captivated by Max Schreck as Count Orlok.
He's so good.
He's so good. Oh my gosh. Just what a phenomenal performance. I was just beyond captivated by him. And then I'm fascinated by the way that vampires like change so much over time, and how we have so many different iterations of what vampires look like. So it was just interesting to watch this version from 1922, given how many other types of vampires that we have seen over the years.
Mhm.
So that was also just fun to see.
Had you guys seen Browning's Dracula too?
I
If
have
not,
not, no,
that's
sorry.
fine.
No, I haven't.
It's comparison a friend of mine made is that Nosferatu is very much like a person who's dead and cannot die and is just kind of suffering through that. And then Todd Browning's Dracula is more capturing the couch lizard aesthetic of Dracula, where he's like, yeah, I got 3 wives. Maybe I'll get a 4th. Yeah, immortal. I'll stick around. Yeah, I'm rich. Like that's way more present there. Whereas like you watch this and it's like, wow, like this sucks. Like, I don't think this is a good thing at all. So even like within just a couple years, you have this totally different rendition of vampirism or whatever. So yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, the theme around nature and kind of the laws of nature is one that really stood out to me too.
Mhm.
I think, Melvin, you mentioned this as well, because the way that Count Orlok is portrayed, or Orlok, sorry, is portrayed, is a lot more animal-like than human-like, you know, and the
Yes.
film is not interested in giving him kind of like more human-like features or desires. Like he really is, it's like he's like stalking his prey. And I thought that those intercutting of the nature sequences of the Venus flytrap bit and then the spider
Mhm.
devouring its prey. Even at the beginning of the film, there's a couple of shots of like a raccoon-like creature and the horses, and there's kind of this kind of Nat Geo-esque moment between them.
Yeah.
But all of that feels like such color and landscape for the larger themes at play here. And even this theme that, you know, the village people are believing and blaming it on the concept of a plague and kind of nature and disease taking its
Mhm.
course and infiltrating into humanity is kind of their explanation for this for the best way that they can. And so I thought that was fascinating. There's not a need to make him sympathetic or, you know what I mean, give him all these different motivations. And just the thrill alone of like, this creature is stalking the town and we're here for it. I thought was a really great
Mhm.
kind of back to basics and then being able to use all the filmmaking techniques to make that really exciting. So it's interesting to see how movies have become so complex and far more, you know, fluff and nuance and premise that's baked in. And just a simple story like this is thrilling.
Yeah, and it's so well paced. Like it's a 90-minute movie, which to my knowledge isn't super common for the time, because most of the Universal monster movies even are like an hour barely. And it continually has like interesting visuals, characters, side characters, moments, clever scenes. And yeah, there's like parts of the story you can point at and like distinctly observe where they take place, which is simultaneously like clever because then we're able to see how this very simple creature does what he does regardless of scenarios, but then also makes it stupendously easy to follow. And I wonder if some of those decisions were made to try to avoid copyright infringement, all of which failed. Every single attempt failed. But it keeps the pace so strong and so linearly. There's only probably like 2 moments I thought were slow, and that was just like transitions between scenes. Like we're watching a boat literally come in from the left, slowly go all the way to the right. And it's just like, all right, like I get it. We're on the boat. Let's move on. And it's just, all right, we're going to just watch this boat for, I guess, 10 minutes or something like that. Oh man. But yeah, it's a banger. It's a banger, certified banger, 100 years, baby. So good. So good.
Well, and then you also think about like we are watching this film with the lens of the way our brains have been stimulated by movies in our current modern era, and for this to hold so well is pretty incredible. You know what I mean? Like this must have been
Mhm.
an insanely thrilling experience in 1922 when just getting to see these visuals on screen come to life and getting to like travel and see these different places on screen visually and feel that immersion must have been thrilling. And like our brains have been trained to be so stimulated by movies with the, the jump scares and like big visuals, that for this to still hold up so well, even with our like brains rotted by just being constantly bombarded with images, is really amazing. So I just, in general in my life lately, I've been thinking about this concept of like going back to much of what we've had in the past. I just bought a record player, so that's been thrilling, and kind of just this like the thrill of things from our past that we kind of left behind and kind of moved into this digital age, but returning back to them, and the simplicity of it is kind of really exciting. And I think this film captures that really well. Just some shadows. I'm like on the edge of my seat,
Yes. Yeah. I know we probably want to transition into spoilers because you guys usually do that about 15 minutes in, but I think what's interesting with what you were just saying about like going back in time and comparing it to even now is I even felt that the movie was sort of trying to draw on passage of time and death, because Orlok himself is described, well, the Nosferatu is described as being like this thing born of Satan, the seed of Satan. And like, he is so clearly like an image of death. And then obviously, like in terms of visuals, he sleeps in a coffin, which is, standard fare for vampires. But there's so much of that present. And then even in the beginning, Ellen, Hutter's wife, is like, receives these flowers, but she doesn't say thanks. She says, you killed them. Like, why'd you do that? Yeah. And so she is also this character that's very afraid of death and like just like existence at all. And then Orlok, where he lives, is this like castle that probably was like bustling. It looks like it's a castle so big there probably were like shops in it, so the person who owned it didn't have to leave. And it's just decadent and gross, and I don't even know if that's right. That's the opposite of what I mean. It's decaying. It's just gone. And then even where Orlok moves in, there's such an awareness of like rotting death. And especially as we watch this film where all the animals are dead now, like they're dead now. All the animals are dead now. Most of the foliage is dead now. If there's trees, they are unrecognizable. It's just so, and the people obviously are not alive. And so there's just something very bizarre and uniquely transfixing about it being a movie that is like also kind of about a time long past. Yeah, that's also something I remember my first watch just being so genuinely actually moved by. I think I remember like crying, not because of the movie, but because I was just thinking of mortality. It's just so like, I'd never seen anything quite so overt in saying like, oh, this is like this is light captured on film that is so old. Like, how far in space has it traveled? So, but I digress. I don't want to get away from it. This isn't my podcast where I do it all the time. This is your podcast.
No, I love that, because that is so much part in the text, and for it to hit just as good, in our modern times is really powerful. For those themes to, one, have aged so well, feel so universally true, but I'm kind of like connecting beyond time with those thoughts and ideas that universally are part of like what as human beings we ponder and are moved by. And that transcendence of time is fascinating for a film that has truly transcended time in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But also is kind of exploiting
most definitely.
Time. Okay, well, let's include a spoiler alert. So if you haven't watched Nosferatu, once again, it's been 102 years. So we're just dive right in now. Okay. What are some other big aspects about this film, or perhaps the way that this film maybe ignited thought trains for you that you found really fascinating this time around?
Yeah, I loved the playing with shadows that you see all throughout this. And so you visually see the shadows. There's that one scene in particular where you just see Orlok's shadow, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's brilliant. But then I love the way that he is described as a shadow. And there's this shadow of darkness that these characters feel. And I found that compelling, because I feel like, there's a lot of like vampire versions of vampires in movies and stuff, but they're not usually described like that. And it felt so much more sinister because there's just this like mysterious shadow of darkness that is looming, and the villagers don't quite know where it's coming from or what's going on. And so that was just thrilling to me to have him described that way. And then obviously the film plays with shadows in a really fun way to kind of complement that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny every time you see his presence nearing the kind of protagonists or the main subjects of the scene. I felt almost that coldness of presence, very much when the Dementors are near and everything begins to shrivel and turn to ice. And so I think the film does an amazing job setting that up, though, because we spend so long before we actually get to meet him and see him. And so to your point, Melvin, earlier around pacing, we spend a lot of time just like traversing the hills around his castle, and we see animals kind of run in the other direction. And so his presence is felt before we see him, and the delay before we actually visually get to lay our eyes on him adds to the kind of build up and the hype of who this character is beforehand. So we kind of meet the essence of him before we've actually met him, which I think helps add to that tension, that pacing, the adrenaline rush of the film visually, but also from a pacing perspective, it almost doesn't give us the satisfaction of seeing that too early, which is a aspect that I think is necessary in creating tension of any kind in a scene, but likely, especially, in horror as well, that delay is really thrilling.
Cold and shadow is good because like he presents himself, or Orlok, he presents himself as like a walking corpse that is frigid. He's constantly in his jammies, like trying to stay nice and warm. And he's holding, like, we see him pick up Hutter, like in a disguise kind of. But then when Hutter meets him at his palace, he steps out of a shadow and he's like holding his own body as if to like prevent himself from perhaps getting too hasty, because he very clearly has a problem with that, as later we'll see him suck on the finger of Hutter to get the blood that is pouring out of his thumb because he cuts himself, and then even doubling down on buying the property across from Hutter's house because he sees Hutter's wife. And it's like someone desperate to get out of their situation because their own body is like fighting them. And I don't intend that to sound sympathetic, but more just that's how he expresses himself, like this perpetual discomfort and energy that can never be satisfied. And so he's just, he's very animalistic, like stated earlier. He moves by whatever things in his brain and synapses are going off, and he doesn't put any perceived thought into the decisions he makes. But he's very powerful, very influential, and very frightening. One of the insights that a friend of mine had was that like the movie, the way that shadow is used for terror too is very, like, it can be easy to miss it this way, but I think there's a fair read to say there's a sensuality going on as well, which is very standard for vampires. When he targets Hutter, Hutter is like it's at nighttime in Orlok's palace in his private room. And then the way we see like Orlok assault him, for lack of a better term, is through the shadow descending upon his like limp body in a posture that is very frightening. And then later on, when he targets Ellen, she's like holding her chest, and we then see the shadow of Orlok pass across her breast and then grab her heart. And there's so much, and also in bed. And so there's this just awful imagery of people being assaulted by a corpse. It's just terrible. And it makes him cold. It makes his shadow terrifying. It is the shadow that you think you see from the corner of your eye and you turn and no one's there, but you're positive someone was, and it's him. And that's terrible. That's really, really terrible. It's just awful.
Yeah, it's impressive that this character from 1922 could haunt your dreams, but the film is really effective in highlighting that terror for sure.
One of the things that I found myself thinking about, which I didn't expect to think about in this film. I thought this was, I just didn't expect my brain to go here. And it's not anything new, but the concept of kind of this fair maiden being the one to find that like redemption or saving the people is a fascinating concept. And in general, especially with early film and these stories, the women in the film are portrayed to be this kind of this picture of innocence. I think Ellen very much so is portrayed to be this pinnacle of a fair maiden and pure and innocent in the way that she shows up in the world. And her being vital to kind of this redemptive arc and her sacrifice was a fascinating aspect of the film that I just found myself thinking about. And for whatever reason, I think seeing it visually in this way highlighted a lot of that for me. I think it's a theme that obviously is baked into storytelling for centuries and all across human civilization, this concept of sacrifice ushering in redemption for people. But I guess seeing it so clearly in this like kind of dichotomy of this pinnacle and representation of evil, and then this picture of pure innocence and her being kind of essential is just a fascinating like thought train that I did not expect my brain to go down. But the like desire and longing we have that shows up in our stories for redemption, for innocence to redeem what is dark and lost is a really neat concept that like I think just pops off the screen in this film.
Yeah, what did you guys think of Ellen? Because she is, I feel like from what I remember reading and then talking about like even with my wife, like she is not exactly a progressive depiction of a woman. She's very fragile. And then also she's like almost like spirit. She's like sleepwalking. She's putting herself kind of in danger. And then she kind of doesn't do much. And yet also she's kind of compelling and super interesting. And also it's not that there's a ton of makeup, but she just has such thick eyeliner that one of my notes just said Ellen's the original goth. So I stan Ellen for eternity, but that's besides the point. Yeah. How did you guys feel about Ellen? Because there's no other prominent female characters. There's like maybe one other, but I don't even know she has a speaking line. So yeah. What'd you think?
Yeah. There was that one moment where she like wakes up in the middle of the night and she has like these thick like raccoon eyes with all that eyeliner, and I was just like, girl, Ellen, we got to talk about your skincare routine. This is not it, my girl. You got to take off your makeup before you go to bed. I went off on a whole thing mentally, which is not where the movie wanted me to go. Yeah, I was kind of intrigued by Ellen. Like at first I was like, gosh, okay, this is fine. It's 1922. I'm not going to expect a lot from you, my girl. Like, just live your life. But I do appreciate that she does seem to like have some agency, and like she's not supposed to read the book, but then she reads the book, and she wants to do something. You know, she wants to sacrifice herself essentially to save everybody. And I'm like, well, if you think that you're sinless, then is that pride? So then are you still sinless? And so then I went off on a whole mental train about that, which is again probably not where the movie wanted me to go. So I was just, I think Ellen does more than I expected her to for this being 1922. So I was like, okay, I will take what we can get for Ellen. I am curious to see what the 2024 version of Ellen might look like. I'm very intrigued about that now.
Yeah, I wonder if the read is, so they say like your Hutter's wife or Ellen's husband. I know that there's an implication, at least with the translation, that they're married. But I wonder if the implication is just that they're courting and they're to be married, because then purity would also mean like virginal, which is, you know, classic standard vampire stuff. And yeah, I wonder, I wonder if that's kind of where it's going, because otherwise, yeah, the implication is like a pure soul in the, it's not Hollywood, but in the Hollywood storytelling fictional sense is what then makes not Orlok, die at the end, because his ostensibly his lust is so strong that he lingers long enough for the husband to find out. That's kind of what it is. As the sun comes up, he's like, dang it, I didn't leave in the middle of the night, and then boom, he vanishes, zooms off into the sun. So yeah, I don't know how to read it, but it's pretty dang cool, right, guys?
I think it's better than what I was prepared for. So the whole sequence where she's sleepwalking and then it's intercutting between Orlok and Hutter at their little dinner party at the castle. And then Ellen seems to have like a sensitivity kind of in the spiritual realm that her husband or her suitor is in danger.
Her significant other.
Her
a very modern way to describe it.
Partner is in danger. And so she clearly has kind of this like weird connection point into the spiritual realm of knowing that she has, that she needs to intervene. And then she kind of calls to him in the spiritual realm as well. And then he wakes up from it or kind of, he also senses danger and is able to run from the castle. But I was like, all right, we got Ellen with some spiritual powers here. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what Eggers does, because I find it interesting that in the kind of few descriptions that we've seen of the film, they describe her as a haunted young woman. So I wonder, I could see him leaning into that a little bit more to potentially make this a far more interesting story of kind of this, like this cat mouse almost, but between these two beings in the spiritual realm, and kind of this, she's not just a damsel in distress. She seems to have a lot more that she's able to do in the spiritual realm.
Well, even the film makes it look like she's literally seeing Orlok assault her husband. And at some point, like, Orlok looks to the right of the screen, and then it cuts to Ellen, and she's looking to the left, and it looks like they're eye level. Classic, what is it? Not classic, Star Wars Episode 8 Reylo scene, and Orlok has his shirt off, and you're thinking, why? But no, he does not have his shirt off. This is a dated reference to a movie, but it's definitely a vampiric name, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm also curious to see, like, both what Eggers does, maybe with the spiritualism, because he likes to play a lot with that, and then additionally, I have yet to see the Werner Herzog rendition, and I've heard that there's a bit more naturism in that particular edition, which makes sense. That's like Herzog's thing. So not sure where he put the naturism in The Mandalorian, but I guess I could find out. Maybe I'll just call him up, because we're close buds. But yeah. What did you guys think about I thought it was interesting how the film started with this, like, because they're in this city and there's like this fascination with science and nature and knowledge and learning, there's like this lack of spiritualism or mythology or folklore. And then Hutter goes out into the rural areas, and they're terrified of werewolves, and there's this book about vampires and all this weird stuff, and superstitions on the boat that they even have. When we see I forget what the boat is called, but when Orlok's on it, there's superstitions about him. Did you guys perceive that maybe there was, like, the film talking about something between the perception of city folk versus the perception of rural folk, and then how the clashing of the two?
Well, I was kind of thinking about that, especially during the kind of, it does the like indie drama thing, artsy fartsy movie of like, let's cut some things together and then you fill in the gaps because it's all metaphorical, when they're showing the Venus flytrap and the spider devouring its prey. But it's the academics that are trying to study nature, and the films, if you want to read it this way, their thesis is that ultimately, like, the hubris of man believing that it can understand all of the spiritual forces at play is a failed endeavor, and that we are, or we should be, humbled to defer and have that deference for nature and the larger forces that be. And so it's fascinating to think about this in terms of 1922, when so much of society was on the brink of so much transformation, and kind of the status
Huge,
quo of family dynamics, social dynamics, gender dynamics, the outbreak of huge technological advances is ushering kind of society into this direction. And this film feels like a let's not forget who we are as humans in our relationship to all these larger forces. So yeah, study the Venus flytrap, but also let's not forget and have our heads become too big. And so it's interesting to think about like Nosferatu as a reflection of like each time and place and era. So I'm super curious what Eggers does, because you can superimpose onto Nosferatu whatever the current fears of the time are, and I think that's a fascinating way to view like history and kind of culture through all the decades.
Yeah, and even like the horror movies of the time had a lot to do with like science run amok. I mean, even it's not Universal. I think it's actually early Warner Brothers. Gosh, I can't remember. Paramount, but Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one of the early ones, which is a rough watch. That is really hard because it's pre-code and very rapey. That one is entirely about the hubris of man and science. And I mean, obviously, the real monster is Dr. Jekyll, and then the active monster is Mr. Hyde. But that is also, again, about like man diving further into like just controlling creation and then losing itself to its own like devices. It's very interesting. And then same thing with, frankly, The Mummy, archaeological horror, so on and so forth. But yeah.
It's interesting that both of those things exist in this film, because I feel like, especially in America, we like to compartmentalize those things, and like science is on one end of the spectrum and spirituality is on the other end of the spectrum, and never the twain shall meet. And it's just interesting that both of them exist so prominently in this film, and the film seems to be pointing us to having the two in conversation with each other rather than separate.
Yeah, and like this is so I was listening to a really interesting podcast talk about this, that like the fact that post-enlightenment, post-industrialism, we are in an age where developed countries have kind of absconded from spiritualism, like at large. And that has just never really been the case for humanity across forever. And so to see this movie that is like kind of talking about this a little bit, where you have the industrialized area and the developed area and the science area kind of saying like, well, if we can understand it, we can control it. And then you have, it's not just a vampire, but most people don't know this. This is a plague movie. This turns into an apocalyptic proportion plague movie by the end. And it's like, part of what's so terrifying is that like, it's just like literally do not go outside. Oh, someone has the plague and died in your house. Government says you can't even take them to the hospital because it's going to spread the plague. And so like, there is just no hope in science, no hope in knowledge. It is just life destroyed by death. And that's it. And it's just wild. Like, how did people step away with that back then? Like, this is like before the atomic bomb. Like, it's just, the existentialism is like at extreme levels in Nosferatu. And then yeah, you put on Todd Browning's Dracula and you're like, what is this? Like, they're just talking in a room. Come on, guys, let's get scary. What are we doing? Anyways, I'm going to stop hating on Todd Browning. I love Freaks and I love The Unknown. I'm just got to repeat it. Man alive. I'm also a Twilight stan, just putting that out there too, in terms of vampires.
Talk about making them real human-like, like they are the hottie crush in your school, apparently.
Gosh golly. Which one were you guys? Team Jacob or Team Edward?
I didn't. I wasn't. I didn't get really into Twilight, so I actually never like.
Oof, you missed out on
Oh,
such a highlight of youth.
such a thing.
Please, Sarah, have this connection with me.
I'm so sorry.
No!
My connection to Twilight is one of my friends that I was working with. She was in her 40s at the time, a mother of 5 children, and she loved Twilight. And she was a big Team Jacob person. And she made me watch one of the movies in the theater with her. I don't remember which one. And so,
full-grown adult.
in honor of her, I'm going to say that I'm Team Jacob, but I actually don't care.
Which one did you
Because I
see?
never
Team
got
Jacob is
into
the
it.
right choice.
Okay,
Team
great.
Jacob is totally the
Excellent.
right choice. They are both, all 3 of them are awful people, and Team Jacob, especially Jacob, is awful. Like showing up, Edward and Bella are already engaged, and Jacob shows up with his shirt off. It's just like, bro, like they are engaged. Your chance is over. Stop it. Gosh golly. But to be on topic, are you Team Nosferatu or Team traditional Dracula?
I don't know. I like this like spiritual, like you can't even place him. He's mysterious. You know what I mean? Like Nosferatu's got a lot in common with Edward Cullen. Like you can't place him. You don't really know. He's a little.
You see him at the bar, and you're like, that guy's got a
Yeah,
story.
but he's never going to tell you.
I want to know that story.
Yeah, he's got to keep his sheen.
I think I'm going to
He's
turn
gotta
into the
keep you
main
at
character of his
distance.
story.
Yeah, he can never be known.
I can keep improving.
Okay.
I won't. I'll resist, but I could. Just letting
For the last 15
that
minutes, just
know,
absolutely
be known.
cool. Well, one of my favorite experiences watching a vampire movie in the theaters was a spoof movie. I don't even know how this movie got made with a theater release, but it was called Vampires Suck.
Vampires suck?
Heck
Yeah.
yes! Did you guys see it? You both saw it?
I know about it. It's like, part of the epic movie series
Yeah.
of stuff.
Watching that in theaters with my friends is probably like a highlight top 10 movie-going experiences ever, you know? Like Friday night, we got like
Put it on
we're, like, juiced up on like, sugar from Coca-Cola and
sugar from Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
That's totally what you're juiced up on.
watching this movie.
Absolutely.
It was great. Pack row.
Oh, man.
All right. Other big things that we wanted to mention with.
Well, I do have a bunch of notes
Yeah.
here. If you want, I can just like read them, and then you can stop me,
I love
and
it.
we can talk about like whatever comes up. So I already mentioned the plants and foliage. We had the superstition with the Hutter and the 2 of them. Irreligious versus spirituality. Orlok's residency. Okay. I guess I covered a lot more of these than I thought I did. I had this one. Dracula is a staple of irresponsible and non-consensual bisexuality, a creature of unfettered desire. Specifically stating here non-consensual and irresponsible, because he is assertive, domineering, and his pursuit of people is usually without them having enough information to technically give consent to becoming a vampire. Very clearly, it's a correlation to sexuality. And he's a creature of unfettered desire. He's abuses, he consumes, and he devours souls. What do you guys think about that? I mean, this movie, I feel like, captures that in such a way that, like, I had forgotten how terrifying the scene when Hutter gets attacked by him is. And there's he's like frozen solid as Orlok is taking over him. And who knows what Orlok does when it happens. And it's especially strange because he had already fed on Hutter. We already see the mosquito bites, he jokingly writes, because he didn't know what they were. Yeah, what do you think about this as this creature who kind of depicts this kind of thing?
This might not be answering your question, but one of the things I think is really
No right answers.
fascinating about the way the whole premise of the way that vampires kind of overtake their prey being incredibly there's no sense of distance that you have with your victim. And I think that's a really fascinating aspect of the level of terror and the level of kind of pure like there's nothing that kicks into when you're that close to someone and taking them out. And the way that we see violence on screen today looks so different. You know what I mean? There's often,
Totally different.
you know, a lot
Yeah.
of many creative kills that we've seen in a gajillion movies, action movies, horror movies, all the things. But kind of it's part of the sensuality of it, but the intimacy of taking your prey and like their face right in front of you and taking them out. It's very,
Yes.
I mean, this is the animal kingdom. Like, you know, to go back to our concept around nature and the way that we see so many of the scenes with the animals. But for a human-like figure to do that to another human, I think is like just jarring to experience on screen, which is, I think, part of the point.
Yeah.
It's almost like the most cold-hearted way to take out your victim when it's in such close proximity. And so those scenes that we see in this film, I think, really that like jumped out to me a lot. And it's the whole concept of a vampire to begin with. So that's how they take out their prey, is to literally, you know, right in their arms, all that stuff. But when you think about it and see it, I think it's a much different experience. So I think that's pretty fascinating, especially with this Nosferatu version, where he is just this like pillar of darkness. There is no other relational dynamic at play here of desire. He's truly just a cold-blooded killer, and there's nothing that the film gives us that I think maybe allows us to have those, you know, roots of sympathy to grow at all. Like there's none of that there, and so it really is just the proximity of the kill, I think, is something that I was feeling while watching this. How about you, Sarah?
Well, and it's so straightforward too. Like, again, I'm going to compare it to more modern vampire things, but like I feel like when you see vampire movies today, it leans into that sensuality and the spectacle, and it's so big. And in this, it just feels like it's so direct. You know, he is this pillar of darkness, and that is his prey. And there's no flash. It's just a shadow. And then he just takes his prey. And I think that lack of spectacle in some ways makes it more frightening and more disturbing, because there's no fluff to get distracted by. It's literally just this vampire just doing what he wants and devouring his prey.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you two were describing what you were, I was thinking of, like, there's Near Dark, Catherine Bigelow's vampire movie, perfect movie, so good and super sensual, not graphic, but like the main character becomes a vampire by a woman, and then he's a young vampire, and he needs to feed. So she kills people so he can then feed through her arm. And it's like the horniest thing you've seen on screen. And nothing sexual is happening, but it's so sensual. And so it's very much a, like, to use the term pornography in the classic definition, it is purposely arousing. And then you have even things like Twilight, as mentioned before, where like sensuality and sexuality is almost treated as like, well, you're a vampire now, your stamina is amazing. And so like that is also alluring. But here it is like, Hutter is like on his back on the bed. We can only really see his open eyes looking up and like the top of his face, and then the shadow of Orlok going down on him, which is suggestive and rapey. It is really gross. And then the same is true with Ellen. And like, the shot of him, like, it's like the full shadow of the room with the window in the back, and you see not just like Orlok at her neck, but his hand is just like completely covering her head. And what Orlok does completely disrespects the humanity of the people he targets. That is not attractive. That is not something you turn into a teen romance novel. That is like the worst thing. and those are people he doesn't even kill. Like, I don't necessarily even know why Ellen dies in particular, because Hutter does not. But like, it's just so different. It's so different to the like sensational way vampirism or superhuman attributes are taken. And I just love that everything about Orlok is gross. that he looks gross, he moves gross, he acts gross, he functions gross, and then he targets people gross. I appreciate some of that. I appreciate a villain who's just bad. Like, that is just bona fide evil. And yeah, it makes the movie much more frightening because of that, I think.
And he's not even on screen that long, too,
No.
which is what I think is so wild. Like, you don't see him very often, but again, that shadow, that presence is always felt. Because even if they don't know that it's him, they're talking about, you know, this darkness or this shadow, or they're talking about, hey, don't go any further, or they're talking about the plague. And so I love that those moments that we do see him, he's terrifying, but then we feel the ripple effects of that terror all throughout the film, which just heightens everything.
Trying to see if anything else. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe we've that the theme of late is making our villains sympathetic in some way and understandable, which is very reflective of the times. But it's refreshing to just see like a cold-blooded, unforgiving force of evil, and the full like culmination of all of that on full display is kind of it's satisfying to watch, or maybe not satisfying as well. It was refreshing for me to watch because I kept actually waiting for this film to, you know, put a little bit in there where you're like, oh, but he's doomed to this life, and a lot more, you know, moments potentially of just him and his loneliness, you know, in his castle and whatnot. We don't get any of that. And we are fully aligned to and loyal to the people and our protagonists, and he really is this force of darkness. So I think that was surprising to me. I guess I was like holding my breath to see, like, you know, it's going to cut to his side and his perspective of this all. And though he is a force of evil, he's a lonely person that's been cursed and doomed to this life, and he is, but the film gives us no room to allow that thought to grow and fester and have that be part of kind of the headspace that we're in. And I thought that was really interesting. It's just so different from a lot of the films, especially as of late, that we get that really allow for that breathing room for us, our thoughts to wander about kind of the humanity behind our villains. And this film's not interested in that at all. So he feels like a larger than life force versus a single creature. He's kind of the representation of a larger thing than an actual creature in and of itself.
Yeah, he's not. I don't believe Nosferatu is considered proto-slasher by any means, but like the slasher like staples are at their best figures of just obscene power and presence, which probably was like mastered through Jason Voorhees, but then like ruined and at their worst when they become complicated, character-driven individuals. It's I just watched this year the Rob Zombie Halloween, which sort of tries to presuppose that like Michael Myers lived a bad life, and then that's when he like snapped and became a killer and stopped talking. Now I want to watch the second one because I hear it's like just this amazing art house violence movie, but that first one was just terrible, and it completely misunderstands why Carpenter's Halloween is so scary. Is because he is just some kid who killed his sister and then came back years later to kill some more people, and he's unstoppable. And like Nosferatu carries that same badge, or at the very least planted it, where he's so indifferent. He just has like a simple direction and desire and takes it. And there is something really frightening about that. And because it's so general and open-ended, you can really utilize it to kind of explore all kinds of things, I think. Like just the hubris of power and to just to pursue without care for other things completely destroys other people. And it's like a wake that passes beyond your scope of vision and starts wiping things out. So in this case, the rats that have plagued this town and completely spread the plague. Yeah, it's all very, it's just blunt. It's super, super blunt. And you can't, I have difficulty having a read further from just, this guy's a monster. He's such a bad dude. He's so evil.
And that's the point, you know? He doesn't need to be anything else. We're not trying to make him into this complex character. He is just this force of evil. And that's it.
So if I can make the worst request. All right, the two of you are now working at Hollywood, and your first project is Nosferatu -1. You have to make the backstory for Nosferatu. You have to tell us why. Why Nosferatu? How is Nosferatu? How did he become who he is? Did he fall in love? Did it not work out? Does he have kids? Is there Nosferatu 2.0? Like, where are we? Who's writing? Who's directing? And what are we doing?
I fear it's the same team that greenlit Solo or Star Wars Story that's probably greenlighting this one too.
Yeah, what are we, some kind of Nosferatu?
Yeah,
or like something
Nosferatu
like
origin
that.
story we didn't want, but I guess we're making now because we got to do it, you know?
I'm trying to think, like, what's, you know, the awful line and so where it's like, what's your last name? I don't have one. Solo. Like, what's the equivalent for Nosferatu? It's just like, gosh, how did that movie get made? I cannot believe it. I forgot a movie existed.
That's
You
probably
just
good. You
ruined
freed
my
up
night.
memory space for better things than that movie. It's very good. You did what Sarah did with Joker. You just wiped it.
Completely forgot it.
Just memory hold it. Yeah, it's the way to go. I'm just wondering if in this prequel that we're making, can we make it that Kylo Ren is a vampire? Because that's fascinating to me. So like he got the Force and then something went wrong and he turned into a vampire. Like I feel like we can somehow have this like Star Wars Nosferatu crossover event. I feel like we can make it happen.
Long time, far, far away. So yeah, Kylo Ren somehow does a Deus Ex Machina, the Force absolves, and he becomes a vampire, or the Force kind of like preserves him, so he becomes like a vampire. And then he consumes blood, because that is where the midichlorians reside. And so he can, and that's why he can move things with his mind, and he can phase through things. Oh my gosh, Nosferatu's a Jedi.
You got it.
This is the worst thing that has ever happened on the planet. I despise this in every respect. It's $1 billion movie.
Every other
It is.
female in America and beyond want to see Adam Driver as a vampire. I am.
That's Count Orlok.
Yeah. People would show up for this, you know?
Shrivelly, lanky man. That's the worst thing I could have ever thought of in my entire life.
I'm so pleased.
It's only
Thank you
downhill
for sharing
from here.
it with us.
I would love to see. So I think it was it an Asteroid City? We got to see Wes Anderson's version of like a alien movie, a little cute little alien.
Oh yeah, stop
See
motion little
some
guy.
whimsical Nosferatu. Can that be?
Speaking of Rob Zombie, his Monsters movie, I forget the woman's name, the woman vampire, but she dates Orlok, and she cannot stand him. And Orlok is like such a dork. So it's some good stuff. So let's transplant that guy into Star Wars, and then transplant him into Nosferatu -1. And we got a stew going. There's a whole franchise. We'll be billionaires. It'll be great.
Okay.
Movies and us production.
Yeah, so that means Han Solo is Nosferatu, Papa Bear. And can we save Solo Star Wars Story in like retrospect somehow?
I would love that. That would be great.
I would like
Gosh,
to
what
get
an
the 2 hours of
embarrassing
my life
movie.
back somehow and have made this worth it. So it's a Easter egg
Yes.
scenario. Weave together here.
Star Wars was a mistake. Just what a mistake. Oh man.
This Robert Eggers version. What are you excited to see? What are you hoping to see? What do you think you'll see from his rendition?
So I've seen The Witch, I've seen Lighthouse, I've seen The Northman. And I like Eggers' style. I like that he's comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't think he is as compelling as most people feel. I think he's a director that is coming into his own. He has a style, but I'm waiting for that moment when I feel like finally, he's got it. And this might sound like a weird comparison because it's a different genre, but I think it helps explain what I mean. John Wick 1, great movie, super good. John Wick 2, a little less, but still fun. John Wick 3, probably the weakest one, but I still wanted to see where it goes. And then you see John Wick 4, and it's like one of the most mind-blowing, testosterone-filled, exciting experiences on the planet. I loved that movie. So good. I don't know how you can make a movie that's over 2 hours that exhausting, and I walk out thinking I want to get a ticket and watch it again that minute. And I'm kind of waiting to see Eggers do something like that, where like I've seen all of what he has been doing come into like the premium format that I feel like people describe him as, and then I see his movies going like, they're pretty good. And so I you know, Hollywood gave him the big money with The Northman, and it didn't totally work out, but part of that's COVID. So who knows? So I'm hoping that with this, like, we get to see his comfortability with restraint excel his abilities. I think I read something that was like he just embraced candlelight because like that's what they would have at the time. So it's like that's why all the trailers borderline look black and white, is because like there's just not that many light sources. It's all we got. And that combined with the casting, not a total fan of the Lily Rose Depp casting. I wish it was still Anya Taylor-Joy, but whatever. I just don't know how you get through The Idol and your career is still alive. That was brutal. And so, yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not a super fan of the standard A24 slow brooding atmospheric art house horror as of right now, but
got another entry.
Could be interesting. But I also just really like this one, and I find it sufficient in that way. It's also been 100 years, and there's been one remake. Let's get another one. I don't mind. But what do you guys think?
Sarah, what are you excited to see?
Yeah, I appreciate Eggers' like visual style and just how like his creativity and how he expresses that on screen. So I'm interested in that like atmosphere and like what he does visually. And you know, this version plays with creating that horror through almost like lack, and it's through shadow and like all of these things that this film plays with. And so I'm curious if some of those things will come through in the 2024 version, or if he's going to take a different tactic to create that tension. And then I'm also just really interested to see how the story might change, because now it is 100 years later. You know, are there going to be more female characters? Will they have agency and actually affect the plot in more meaningful ways? And just how do you change a story, you know, 100 years later when the world has changed so much? So I'm curious just about little things like that, but mostly I'm excited. Let's go. Let's watch a vampire movie on Christmas. I'm ready.
This release date, man. They know that they got their loyal following that's going to show out for this, you know. Just get them in the warm. The people that's got enough of the warm fuzzies and they're like, give me just something real I can sink my teeth into. I'm super excited for this. I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers. I'm intrigued to see thematically what he chooses to like anchor on. I think this is like such a great medium to explore a lot of the themes that are potentially top of mind, relevant now. So I think that'll be fun. I hope we get to see some of those moments of like paranoia, what this looks like for a village or whatever the equivalent is in this movie. I would love to see like Ellen v Nosferatu, like spiritual battle. Like she's holding her own, you know, if we're going to use the Kylo and Rey metaphor, like they're two sides of equal powers. And, you know, I want him to have a little bit of a harder job. I think that'd be really fun to see from our female character. It'd be thrilling. And I'm hopeful for that based on the way this movie's been described so far, but we'll see. I don't think it'll be a full on Ellen v Nosferatu, but I want that movie. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a great time. Robert Eggers does some incredible stuff. So, oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I forgot a train was going by. Is there anything you guys are worried about? Like, after having seen this, you're like, I really hope that like he goes a different direction, or I really hope he leaves this as it is. What do you guys think?
Not really. I'm curious to see where he's gonna go. It will be post seeing it that I'll be like, nah, dude, you messed up. But right now I'm just like, we'll see what he does.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because I think we usually talk about like what we're excited for, but I think he's so great on the visuals. I'm sure the visuals be fabulous. I hope there's meat. I hope
Totally.
there's meat to sink our teeth into. So I hope.
Mhm.
I mean, it'll be fun as like a vibes movie. Like, oh, we came and saw some cool
Totally.
stuff. But like, if he can sink his teeth into something deeper and like use this as a vehicle, I'm gonna just eat this up. Really. No.
Yeah, the two things I would not want to see is like attempts at recreating particular shots. Obviously, he's going to do the up the staircase. I mean, I feel like that's like inevitable, and like I could comfortably roll my eyes at that because like it doesn't need to be redone. We've seen it; it's great, and leave it as is. But I suspect that he might avoid doing that and attempt to just create new visuals that are just terrifying. So I don't want to see him rehash that. And then in terms of the underlying sensuality of the film, we are living in a time wherein, and pardon the vulgarity here, we are living in a time wherein the internet makes it so easy for people of all kinds to access hardcore pornography. And that pornography can include really violent stuff, and people are aroused by that. And so the fact that this movie, the original, has such a like rapey sensuality to it that is very clearly negative and non-graphic is part of what I think helps make it so much more impactful. And I would despise if Eggers decided to maybe up that into a more modern HBO Hollywood sort of sensibility, because of the fact that so many people have now been sexually desensitized that something like Lily Rose Depp getting like assaulted and like that to me would be just despicable. I haven't found Eggers to push his sexuality in his movies that far. I think The Lighthouse
Yeah, I was gonna say
got there, but it was also very it's that was pushing it. But I think like there was something different going on there that wasn't quite as vile as what Orlok does to his victims. In that movie, it's like a fantasy, maybe, and it's clear the two are interested in it. So even if it is very taboo. And so here, like I would be very like, I'm going to have to wait and see what that rating comes out and says. And then I want to hear what the context is. Because, it's such a sensitive thing. And unfortunately, people have not just brain rotted with TikTok and Among Us, but they've also brain rotted with just absolutely the most dehumanizing things on the internet. So, I don't want to see that in my. I don't want to see that in my good Christian Nosferatu. Like, that's what I don't want to see that at all.
See that on Christmas. Or any.
Yeah, could you imagine?
Yeah.
Every family going to see Nosferatu. Can't wait. It's just the most putrid things. Just like Fight Club got Tyler Durden putting in between the film reels.
Yeah.
It's so awful. But
yeah. No.
That's all I got though.
Those are two good ones. What's one on that? Okay, another last big thoughts before we wrap. We hit it all.
It's a good movie, guys. If you're listening, you haven't watched it yet, and you've been reticent because it's a silent film, first off, watch some silent films. They're very interesting ways of translating information. There are things about them that are formative to the medium. And then there's just actors that like unbelievable people who captured very early on in the medium that what they're doing is not stage production. So they don't have to be exaggerated. They can be subtle. And it's unique, it's powerful, it's engaging, and it's just a whole new world of filmmaking. Plus, most of the movies are short, and so you can bang out like 30 of them in a day. So, like, just dive into it and start with Nosferatu. It's a very good place to start. It's a well-paced movie. It's still good, and it freaks people out to this day. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. And my last quick shout out is the score of this is incredible and is doing the most to help this land so
Totally.
well. So that is a plus as well. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion 1922 Nosferatu. You can find it available to stream on a whole host of streaming platforms. They've really made this film accessible and available, which I think is awesome as well. So that's pretty great. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. And a big thank you to you, Melvin, for joining us finally to get to pod together, the first of many. Where can people find more of you, your film commentary, your thoughts, perspectives, all that goodness on the internet?
Sure. So Cinematic Doctrine, you can search it and you'll find it pretty much everywhere. Got a website. So if you want to check out some blog posts, you can go there. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Threads. You can find some posts on TikTok. And yeah, any podcast app you have, I'm probably on it too. Weekly episodes. January is usually a hiatus time, but then I get right back to it. And then, yeah, we probably have covered something you're interested in. And we've probably covered something that at the very least is entertaining. And if you're frightened by party pleaser style format, dive into them. We'll carry you through the whole movie. It's always just pretty funny and silly stuff. And at the very least, tune into the Francis Ha and Joker Folie à Deux episodes because you'll hear some familiar voices. The joke here is that Movies and Us is on those episodes. So go listen to those 2 episodes because they're pretty dang good. Yeah, you'll find them anywhere. Spotify, iTunes, shoot some reviews. Make sure to review Movies and Us too, because this show's pretty good too.
We will include all that goodness, links, handles, all that stuff in the show notes. So make sure to check Melvin out. He's got some amazing content that's regularly coming out, all things movies and conversations around movies in general. So, okay, well, our name, Movies and Us, sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about 1922 Nosferatu. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at MoviesandUsPod, or you can email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. So we're doing a little sandwich here in the month of December. We're doing Nosferatu 1922. Next week, we're going to be covering The Holiday. That's going to come out on Christmas Day. And then we're going to be covering the 2024 Robert Eggers version. So we have begun our sandwich, y'all. Next week will be a refreshing palate cleanser with The Holiday. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you again very soon.